and welcome to the 2018 annual meeting for Future Heights. My name is Julia Caius-Sabel. I am honored to be the board president for this organization. Thank you. Tonight's meeting, we're going to be talking about housing, particularly as an asset and also as an opportunity. I would like to, the next slide wasn't what I expected already. That would be why. I would like to thank our sponsors who have made this night possible, and also the members of Future Heights. Clearly the work of Future Heights, as well as evenings like this, are not possible without strong membership. So thank you very much. In attendance tonight, I do want to honor those who serve the different cities. We have representatives, our Mayor, Carol Rowe from Cleveland Heights. We do have Cleveland Heights City staff, Tim Boland, Alan Butler, Suzanne Neerman O'Neill, and Cynthia Johnston. Thank you for being here. One more elected official, Judge James Costello, is here as well with a particular interest in housing. From University Heights, we have Patrick Grogan Myers, and from South Euclid, we have Michael Love. So thank you very much, because honestly, this work without partnership isn't hard. So without further ado, we're just going to jump into it. So I would like to bring Deanna Bremer-Fisher up to the table, or the podium. She is the Executive Director of Future Heights for the last 10 years. So welcome.
Thank you, Julia. I am thrilled to be here tonight. About a year ago, I stood here and we had our annual meeting, and I didn't know where we would be at this time. And here we are, still in the Coventry building. So, yay, we're still here. So thank you all for being here tonight. I'm going to do a little bit of a year in review for Future Heights to sort of bring you up to speed on a lot of the different things that we've been working on. Future Heights has a very small staff, and they are probably all in the back working. So if Future Heights staff could raise their hands. We've got Sruthi Basu, we've got Emily Benson, and we've got Courtney Arbogast, our interns. So we have a very small staff, and so we really rely on our volunteers, our board members and our community members who help us get our projects done. And we have a comprehensive work plan that has goals and action steps, and that's how we organize our work. And we kind of have things organized in these 5 buckets. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the things that we're doing in each of these 5 buckets tonight. And I'm going to start out with neighborhood planning. This is a project that we have wanted to do for a while, ever since we really started working with Noble Neighbors, and I know Brenda May and some of the other Noble Neighbors are here. If you guys can raise your hands. A lot of Noble Neighbors are here. All right. So we know that the Noble Road Commercial Corridor is the entrance to that neighborhood. That's the front door for all of those beautiful homes that are in our Noble neighborhood. And so we wanted to do a planning project. We started working last year. We had a couple of workshops with Noble Neighbors to talk about their vision for what they wanted to see in their commercial areas. And we put together a request for proposal for a planning project. And we started talking with different stakeholders about it, and we were very fortunate that we had at least one funder who was very interested in possibly funding that study. So we issued that request for proposal just this past month, and we've gotten several planning firms that are interested, and we are going to hear from them by the end of this month. June 29th is when those are due. We have in the process been talking with all of the stakeholders, both cities, Cleveland Heights and East Cleveland, because as you know, Noble goes through to Euclid Avenue in East Cleveland. GE Lighting is there as well, so we've been talking with them. And we've also been talking with NOAA, which is the Northeast Ohio Alliance for Hope, and is in the process of becoming the CDC for the city of East Cleveland. And of course, we've been working with Noble Neighbors as well through the process. So that project is going forward, and we're very excited about that. Secondly, in regarding neighborhood planning, this project right here, this Coventry Peace Campus, as you know, we've been through a lot in the last year, and we're very excited that the library now owns this property, the entire campus, and we've already started talking with them about planning for this site, beginning with the Peace Park. Because many of you know it's 25 years old, it's nearing the end of its lifespan, so we need to talk about the park immediately, but we also need to talk about the entire campus in the context of that. So we're starting that conversation. We've had one planning meeting so far. We've got plans to do surveys, and if you're interested in this topic, and I hope that you are, at the Coventry Village Library on July 19th at 7 p.m., we're going to have a conversation about the Coventry Peace Park. So I invite you all to go there and participate in that conversation. It's just the beginning of what's going to happen here on this campus. And then thirdly, regarding neighborhood planning, we also are working on a number of advocacy issues. And those of you who've known Future Heights since our very beginning, this is what we started with as residents, beginning with our advocacy work for different policies that we think will benefit the community. And so here are just a few of them that we've been talking with the city about and with residents about for the past several years, some of which are coming close to fruition. And we're going to continue to do that as your CDC. Also, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about economic development. You can't see the slide too well, unfortunately. We've realized that our projector is needing some help these days. But we're working on a GIS-based database, geographical information system, so that properties are located on a map. And we're going to put this on our website. We've got part of it on there now. So for each business district in Cleveland Heights, you'll be able to see where the vacant storefronts are. And so this isn't for big development projects, but it's really geared towards those small independent business owners who are looking for the next space to open up their shop, or looking for their first space to open up their shop. And it's just a resource for people to find information online and hopefully call us or call the broker if there is one for that space, and we can help the city get new businesses into our business districts. So this is under development. We've got the Cedar Lee area done. We're pretty close to getting Noble done, thanks to the help of our Noble Neighbors volunteers, and a few other of the business districts as well. Eventually, we hope to have all the business districts done. Also, in regards to economic development, we do a series of workshops, and we've gotten funding from US Bank this year to do a series of 6 workshops. And the next one that's coming up is moving from a home-based business to a storefront. We've done a number of different topics, trying to really focus on those topics that will help the types of businesses that tend to locate in our business districts. We also recognize them through the annual Best of the Heights Awards. Pictured here is Boss Dog Brewing Company, which won Best New Business in 2018. And we also do, through the Heights Observer, feature articles on our businesses and produce the holiday gift guide every year in the Heights Observer to help you know what our local businesses have to offer and support them. Now, next I want to talk about placemaking, and we're really excited about this project. And I don't know if our volunteer, Chris Heitman, is here tonight. I hadn't seen him, but he's really been spearheading this project for us. Taking a look at this walkway from the parking area at Cedar Lee to the street front, and thinking about what could make it a very exciting place, a signature place for Cleveland Heights. And we've had one visioning workshop on June 2nd, where we had about 25 or so people who came together and looked at different aspects of the park and came up with ideas both for the short-term improvements that could be done for the park and for long-term improvements for the park. Short-term things could be adding some Christmas lights to help lighten up the area, some public art. In fact, we're working with Heights Arts right now, hopefully in the next couple months, to get some public art installed on some of the blank walls that are in this space. So those are some of the temporary things that we could do. But the groups also came up with some longer term plans that we're in the process of working with an architect to get drawn out so that we can then share them with the public, get more ideas, get those costed out, and then get some funding to do the long-term plans as well. So we've come up with some really great ideas in terms of adding water feature, an outdoor screen, some seating, outdoor stage. There's a lot that could happen in this very small space. So stay tuned on this because we just had the June visioning session, and sometime this summer we'll be having another visioning session on this park. And in the meantime, we're also looking at temporarily activating sites. So development sites in many of our business districts, there are some rather large sites that have nothing going on in them right now. We're hopefully going to be developing them. So the Lee Meadowbrook site, as you may know, the city issued an RFP, and I think just recently selected a development partner for that site, so that project's moving forward. But shovels aren't going to hit the ground tomorrow, so there is a little bit of time. Last summer we did the silent disco for Heights Music Hop in that space. This summer we've got some ideas for some other events that can happen there. Many of you may have attended the antique car show that the CID had the other week. We've got an organization called Whiz Bang, which is kind of a circus tent act, as well as the old vaudevillian flea, and they're looking at doing something on August 18th in the Lee Meadowbrook site. At the same time, the former McDonald's lot along Noble Road, we're also looking to program that. So during the We Are Noble event, we had the old vaudevillian flea there, and we also had Heights, Taste of the Heights, Talent of the Heights music programming there. So in December, we're looking at doing a winter wonderland there together with Noble Neighbors. So just programming some of those vacant spaces to get people used to being there, being in that area, bringing life to those business districts, and hopefully at some point getting economic development to happen in those areas. And as I mentioned, the Heights Music Hop, we've got information here tonight for 3 days in 3 business districts this year, September 13th, 14th, and 15th. And we've got all of our venues lined up and are beginning to book the acts. It's going to be another amazing event, and hope that you will be able to join us for that. I'm going to talk a little bit about our civic engagement activities. Many of you know that we do a series of workshops for neighborhood leaders. We've had almost 50 Cleveland Heights residents who have gone through those workshops at this point. Picture on the top there is a picture of our most recent class with some of our city officials. One of the sessions that we do, we introduce them to things that are happening in the city and give them an opportunity to talk directly with our chief of police and our city officials. So this is a series of 6 workshops. We've had participants from just about every neighborhood in Cleveland Heights, except for one that we're hoping to get this year, and that's the North Coventry neighborhood. Courtney Arbogast is our VISTA intern. Courtney, if you can raise your hand. She's working on a special project for us this summer. So she's our summer VISTA, and she is working on a back-to-school event that's going to happen in the North Coventry neighborhood. We're trying to get those residents organized and interested in some of the Future Heights activities, and hoping to have them participate in our workshops in coming years. We also, through the workshops and elsewhere, we do 2 rounds of neighborhood mini grants, where any neighborhood group can get up to $1,000 for a small project. And to date, we've done 22 projects and given away $14,886. And as you can see with these dots on the map here, these are projects that have happened all throughout the city. These have been projects that have been community gardens, have been special events, public art. The mural in the Cedar Taylor Business District is a grantee. And even special projects. We did a project with a community group that had provided driving lessons for the Bhutanese refugees in the Noble neighborhood. And 5 refugees were able to go through that program and are now drivers and are able to help the rest of the population get to jobs and school and other places. So some really creative and exciting projects. December 8th is it? We're holding our mini grant celebration. Some more information on that, and you really should come to that because it's wonderful to hear the different projects and the progress that people are making in their neighborhoods. Also, Future Heights, and you may not know this, but we are the fiscal agent for a couple groups who don't have their 501c3 status, but by partnering with us and we act as their fiscal agent, they are able to do more fundraising and do more activities in their neighborhoods. So the 2 fiscal agencies that we have currently are Spirit Corner, which is here in the Coventry neighborhood, and Noble Neighbors. And also we do a series of public forums, and we've done 3 of them so far this year. But the one that is coming up is on July 17th at the Bottle House, called Placemaking, Creating a Front Porch Culture. So we're just working on the PR for that, and you'll hear more about that. But we've done some terrific programs this year, and are going to continue with that. I want to talk a little bit about the Heights Observer. We are celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year, and it's been quite a project. Many people think that we're a bigger publication than we actually are, and we were very gratified to come in 2nd place in Ohio's Best Non-Daily Community Newspaper category. This was the All Ohio Excellence in Journalism Awards that's sponsored by the Press Club of Cleveland. We were beat out by the Cleveland Jewish News. And we were in good company. Cleveland.com, Plain Dealer got several awards, and so it was very gratifying to be part of that journalism community. In 10 years, this project has come a long way, and I know many of you have participated in that, so we're really proud of the Heights Observer, and we want to keep it going, so thank you all for participating in that. And lastly, I just want to talk about building organizational capacity, because if we don't build our capacity, we can't achieve all of the things that I've just talked to you about. Through our strategic planning process, we decided that we wanted to become a CDC, and when we started doing the research, we found out that we already are a CDC. We're doing the activities of a CDC. So we joined the Ohio CDC Association, and that's been a great resource for us. We joined last year, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about some of the resources that we've been able to get. But as you probably also know, we've been talking with the city about becoming their CDC partner. And as you know, that our master plan calls for a CDC. There have been various committees that have also called for a CDC. And in fact, the city has passed legislation enabling the city manager to talk directly with us and negotiate a partnership agreement. So we're in the process of that. We're talking directly with our city manager to work out those details, and we don't have the details worked out yet, but I want to share with you just a couple of the things that we have agreed to at this point. And the first one is that our neighborhoods are our #1 priority. And Cleveland Heights is a bedroom community. And we don't have a lot of industry here. It's really the character of our neighborhoods that make it such an attractive place to live in. And so that's got to be our #1 priority. And this is where the city wants to put its resources, understandably. Housing is one of our greatest assets. That was the title for this year's annual meeting, and it's certainly true. So that's one thing that we've agreed on. Number 2 is we've identified a couple target areas in the city. And these 2 target areas are the northern part of the city, which is up here in the dark area here, and surrounded by so I guess it's sort of a purple border, and then here in the middle here with the dark red border is the mid-city area. And the yellow dots that you can sort of barely see on there are the vacant lots. And so that's one of the factors that we use to determine where those target areas would be. But these are the areas that have the greatest need in our city, so we need to target our resources there. And it doesn't mean that we won't continue to serve the entire city. It doesn't mean that if there are problem properties elsewhere in the city that we won't do anything to address them. It means that we need to focus our resources in these particular target areas. And in fact, just on that note, you might notice that on your table there's a couple handouts. One of them is about problem properties. Almost everybody I talk to in Cleveland Heights, no matter what neighborhood they live in, there's usually that one house, hopefully it's just one, sometimes it's more, that's a real problem. And if it's a problem, we want to know about it. Sometimes people don't know who to contact in the city about certain things, and Future Heights is happy to act to help residents understand the process and how to get some help there. And in addition to that, we're also just collecting data. So if you've got a problem property in your neighborhood that you want to let us know about, please fill out that form and hand it in to us. And then lastly, as I talked about, some of the things that we're agreeing to is that we need to do some programs around housing. You noticed in that map that there are a lot of vacant lots, and so the city doesn't have the capacity to do infill housing. It also doesn't necessarily have the capacity to do rehabilitation of existing housing. And so it's looking for its CDC to do that, to fill that role. And so that is what we've been talking very earnestly with the city about, is developing some new programs that would enable us to do that, do rehabilitation of housing as well as some infill housing. And as I talk about building organizational capacity, one of the things that's going to enable us to do that is through the Ohio CDC Association. The Ohio CDC Association is a VISTA sponsor. VISTA is similar to the Peace Corps. So usually young people, sometimes people who are mid-career, changing careers, are volunteering to do a year of service. They do get paid for this work, but it's a very modest amount. Courtney, as I introduced you to earlier, is our summer VISTA. So she's working for us for 3 months through the VISTA program, through the Ohio CDC Association. We are currently seeking a full-time VISTA. And this full-time VISTA person would work on our new housing programs, help us develop these new housing programs. So we've got about another month that we can recruit somebody. If you know somebody who would be interested in the VISTA position, working specifically on housing, please let me know, because we're very interested in having that person on board. We are talking with the city about some resources to enable us to hire a professional. In the meantime, we'd like to get started on these programs, and we really need additional personnel to help us do that. So, please let me know if you know of somebody who might be interested in serving as a full-time VISTA at the Future Heights organization. And on that note, we also are raising money that would give us unrestricted dollars to be able to do all of the work that we've been talking about here. And we've got a fantastic event that we are planning for August 3rd. It's a Friday. And this beautiful house that you see pictured here, you might recognize it if you ever drive up Cedar Hill. It's the very first house on Harcourt that is undergoing massive restoration. The new owners, Don and Anya Rudd, have rehabbed the entire interior. She's an interior designer. She's done an amazing job, and they're now working on the exterior. Our event will be both inside and outside, so you'll get to see both spaces. And we are also honoring Steve Presser. Many of you know that he's just recently closed the Big Fun store, and we're very sad about that. But Steve has been a very strong advocate for small independent businesses. He's been really the primary spokesperson as we talk about supporting local and shopping local. Steve has always been there. So we are honoring him this year at our event that we are calling Living is Big Fun in Cleveland Heights. So there is information on your table about that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more tonight. But at this point, I want to introduce Vince Reddy and go and continue on with the rest of our program. So Vince Reddy is a resident of the Noble neighborhood in Cleveland Heights. He's an urban planner by training, and he worked for the city of Cleveland Heights for about 9 years as a zoning administrator. And he's currently a project manager for Land Studio. And at Land Studio, he interacts with many community development corporations and neighborhood organizations. He is also currently serving his 4th 3-year term on the Future Heights Board of Directors. He's my longest serving board member. And in that capacity, he has served in many capacities over the years on the board. He currently sits on 2 committees, our Civic Engagement Committee and our Heights Observer Advisory Committee, as well as the Executive Committee, where he is our current treasurer. So Vince is going to give you a little bit of the status of housing in Cleveland Heights. And Vince, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to be brief tonight. My main role, as I see it, is to lead us up to Sally Martin, our keynoter. And the last time I spoke at one of our annual meetings was, I think it was 2013, and I was in a much deeper state of despair about Cleveland Heights then than I am now. And I live in the Noble neighborhood, as Deanna pointed out, and I was I just felt like our neighborhood was going to hell in a handbasket, and I don't feel that way anymore. And I think it's partly because of things have just gotten better in the economy, but I also want to acknowledge noble neighbors and the value of becoming organized and working to making your neighborhood better. I also acknowledge that tonight I'm here in a hornet's nest of people who know more about housing than I do. So my one strength is that I've been a census geek since I think since I was like 12 years old. So I do want to take some information from the American Community Survey and use that to just make a few points tonight. I also want to just say that I just love Cleveland Heights. I've lived here for almost 22 years now, and I acknowledge that we just have so many problems now that, like, 10 or 12 years ago, we just thought we would never have these problems in Cleveland Heights. But just certain things like, I like my neighbors, a very diverse group of neighbors I have, and who have activities and things that go on that I don't even know couldn't even explain what it is. But they seem positive, happy, different from what I do in my house. When I call the police in Cleveland Heights, which I have to do probably once a year or something like that, I know that I'm pretty confident, I'll say, that they're going to come and they're going to handle the situation in a way that's respectful to the people that I'm calling the police about, which I value very much. And I do think of, Cleveland Heights is not a city in the sense of Cleveland or Dayton. It's really part of a greater metropolitan city. So I sometimes think of Cleveland Heights in terms of what do we bring to the situation. And when I first came here to work for the city, 21 years ago, it was a really hard decision whether to move here or to stay in the place where I was before, where I was happy. But I was drawn here just because Cleveland Heights seemed different to me, and I feel like back then Cleveland Heights was really kind of setting the standard for urban Cleveland, in the sense we had viable urban walkable commercial districts when really almost nobody else did. I mean, unless you had to go pretty far to look for one, like maybe Oberlin or something. And we've sort of slipped in that regard. Other places have come on, which I think is great. I love seeing all of the revival in various Cleveland neighborhoods and Shaker, places like that. But I feel in some ways we're still the best. And not that I want to be like parochial and say, we should succeed at everyone else's expense, but I do think if Cleveland Heights fails, that I don't have great hope for greater Cleveland in the long run. So what I'm going to talk about, let's see, and I only have like 6 slides, maybe 7. This concept of hypervacancy, which I just heard about for the first time in an article, in a Lincoln Institute article about problems with vacant housing and vacant land. And so I wanted to look at, and there's no standard for defining hypervacancy, so the one I used was in a census tract, which I think we have like 15 census tracts in Cleveland Heights, and I think there's 4 in University Heights. If more than 10% of the housing units are in this category. These are some of the categories that the Census Bureau uses to classify vacant housing. And a lot of these are, these are things you would expect in any neighborhood. The house is for rent, so nobody lives there. It's for sale, so nobody lives there. It's for seasonal use, so nobody lives there. But this other category, other vacant, I think that's the one to worry about, because that sort of means like vacant housing that is languishing, that is, and I think we all, especially in Greater Cleveland, have come to know what that means. A house that's like sitting there and you wonder what's going on with that house as it continues to deteriorate. So I wanted to look at hypervacancy in Cuyahoga County and in our part of the neck of the woods specifically. This map, I know we need a new projector, and as the treasurer of Future Heights, I would say we need money to buy a new projector. So this actually shows Cuyahoga County, but you can't see it on here. It just shows our Mother City, and then our little collection of inner ring suburbs, and then Lakewood that we're often grouped with and compared to. And then in terms of hypervacancy, so I used American Community Survey, which is a ongoing survey done by the Census Bureau, and it replaced the long form on the census. So there's no, in the 10-year census, there's no longer a long form. Instead, it was replaced by the American Community Survey, which is done on a continuous basis. Because it's only sample data, it's a little bit, there's a big margin of error, but it's good for looking at long-term trends. And so here, you can see that these are all the census tracts in Cuyahoga County that in the 5-year leading up to 2011 were hyper vacant by my 10% standard. So all the at least 10% of the houses in these census tracts were languishing in the years, like, and some of this data came before the foreclosure crisis, because this is 2007 to 2011. So you can see, big parts of the city of Cleveland, and we had one at that time. The only one Cleveland Heights had at that time was the area just east of the Cedar Lee Commercial District. And you can see that East Cleveland was a little bit more than half. Everything essentially north or west, however you want to look at it, of Euclid Avenue was in this category. And then other places like Old Brooklyn. But then the next 5-year data set. So, well, one more thing. Like, there's 443, I think, occupied census tracts in Cuyahoga County. So in this data set, 2011, 125 had hypervacancy issues. More than 10% of their homes housing units were languishing, to use my term. Then in 2016, it increases, but not as much as you might think. It's up to, I think this is 145 compared to 125. And the ones that are lighter color on here dropped out of that. They no longer were hyper vacant. And some of that is because the data is not perfect. There's big margins of error, but some of it is because those neighborhoods, I think, have actually dropped out. But you can see that, like now, for example, the entire city of East Cleveland is in this status, which I don't think surprises anyone. And we have now 4 census tracts that have this hyper vacancy status. Then I take it, just to give you the lay of the land here, in case you're not a map person. This is Cleveland Heights here in the middle, then Cleveland and our neighboring inner ringers, and then so this was Cleveland Heights and vicinity hypervacancy in 2011. As I said, we just had this one area right there, and it's. But you can see, many in the east side of Cleveland, it was not surprisingly, very much in this category. Then 2016, you see it kind of advancing, which is not a surprise either, I don't think, because we all know that the east side of Cleveland, it was like it was hit by a hurricane or something, and parts of Cleveland Heights really were also in that situation. But interestingly, this neighborhood was not anymore in the hypervacancy category, and I'm not, I don't really know why that is. So, I think that's just kind of setting the stage, I think, for our discussion tonight. Because like I was telling you that there's problems with housing in Cleveland Heights and University Heights is not a surprise to anyone in this room, I don't think, tonight. But this just gives you an idea of how it's, things have gotten worse, and at the same time, I think they've gotten better. So, which I know doesn't exactly make sense, but I think you would mostly agree with that. This is my last slide, and this doesn't really have to do with housing per se, but I think it shows like the patterns are kind of similar. This is shows percentage of families with incomes below the poverty level in 2016, and this is also from the American Community Survey. And it's, one of the things I love about Cleveland Heights is its diversity, and we're diverse not only racially but diverse economically, obviously. And yet, I don't think it's good that we have poor people, but if there are poor people, I do think that we should have, we should be a place that people who are poor or rich can come to find opportunity. And one of the things I love about Cleveland Heights is that, both like in the popular narrative, that's what it is, and also in reality, some ways it is that way too. So, but just so if you look at our numbers, some of them are, you think, oh, like if you look at this place, and I won't say why, but when I worked for the city, I called this neighborhood the Devil's Triangle. And just because of some difficult people I had to work with there. But that's our richest neighborhood, and it's like almost no families are living in poverty there. But North Coventry, which is close to really what I think is still the best commercial district in Greater Cleveland, 56.1% of the families in North Coventry are living in poverty. That's like one of the worst in the whole area. Like nothing in East Cleveland actually matches that. So it just gives you an idea of just kind of the lay of the land in that regard. But even places like Shaker and Lakewood that people sometimes I think have really think they've just gotten beyond everything. Still are dealing with a lot of the same issues that we are. So really, that's my whole thing. I now have the pleasure of introducing Sally Martin, who I've never actually met, but who I've heard about, and our keynote speaker for the evening. When we were back discussing who would be a good speaker for our annual meeting this year, Deanna mentioned Sally, who I'd heard of, but I didn't really know. Deanna really knows Sally. Oh, sorry. Dealing with Sally from the, I think mostly from the First Suburbs Consortium. And Sally has served on the housing committee there. And in Deanna's opinion, and Sally, I hope you live up to this, Sally's the foremost expert on entering housing issues in the region. She's a longtime resident of South Euclid since 2001. She's been the housing director there since 2009 and was instrumental in forming One South Euclid, which is the city-affiliated community development corporation in South Euclid. She's led the fight to develop innovative solutions to the foreclosure crisis and all of the other housing issues that affect the inner ring. As Future Heights was beginning to explore becoming a CDC, Deanna really looked to Sally for her expertise. So we're thrilled to have her here tonight to share with us her ideas about South Euclid and the inner ring in general. So please join me in welcoming Sally.
Thank you. That's the down button, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, and I was a former resident of the Noble neighborhood. When we first moved to the area, we lived on Montford Road, and right down the street from your beautiful community garden, and we absolutely loved living there. My husband's family is from South Euclid, so when we came back, we landed in South Euclid. But I have a very soft place in my heart for your city, and I think it's wonderful. So it's an honor to be here to talk about what we've been able to accomplish next door to you in South Euclid. And like all good speeches, this one starts with a quote. And this by the social media and marketing guru Simon Mainwaring. But I would say that it could have easily been written by my friend and Cleveland Heights resident Kermit Len. Kermit. This should be an honor to have such wonderful people here, and I'm going to out several of them during this talk. But essentially, he's saying we need to develop and disseminate an entirely new paradigm and practice of collaboration that supersedes the traditional silos that have divided governments, philanthropies, and private enterprises for decades, and replace it with networks of partnerships working together to create a globally prosperous society. And really, what is that? A fancy way of saying we're all in this together, and the only way through it is together. And breaking down these silos, whether that's between cities, nonprofits, or within City Hall. So we've endured a housing crisis that has continually shape-shifted. It's demanded new approaches to tackle it, and none of us could tackle this alone or with the same tools we've used for decades. And that's what I realized coming into South Euclid and taking this challenge on of managing the housing department. Together, we've figured out where the bottlenecks are, and we've started to solve them. So in Cuyahoga County, we have example after example of this. As a region, we've set the bar for a nation, and I've seen firsthand when I've attended national conferences where innovation is always placed front and center. So after 10 years, I can say we're finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's been a long battle. As Kermit Lynn says, it's a question of will and persistence. In South Euclid, we have a lot of both. For a small city with very small resources, we've managed to achieve some impressive results through a combination of strategic collaborations and sheer political will. Our mayor, Mayor Wheelo, believes that taking a good idea and running with it is the way to go. She also knows that success doesn't occur in a vacuum, and as go our neighbors, so go we. Our fates are interconnected, and in that spirit, I've come to share some of what we've done over the last 10 years, and I've been tasked with doing that in 10 minutes, so fasten your seatbelts. And if you want to know more, we're right next door and always happy to chat, and we always have tea on, so stop by and see us. And this is just the basic demographics of our city, and most of you are aware. We're getting younger though, and our median age is now 39, our median income is 56.5, so we're solidly middle class, and eds and meds are our main employers. And this data is from Frank Ford, who I'm going to out also, who's sitting over there near Kermit Lind and Dennis Keating. He's done a lot of research, and if you haven't seen it, I'm going to show you some of it, but he has so much, where he's been looking at arm's length sales transactions in Cuyahoga County for the longest time, and this is 17 years worth of data. So it shows you where we've been and where we are now. And even in 2018, we've climbed further out of the abyss, and every single sector and section of Cuyahoga County is climbing, even the hardest hit areas of the east side of Cleveland. But you can see we still have a long way to go. So the little number in parens there is the percentage of recovery to the peak year, which ended up in this case being around 2004. So the foreclosure crisis caused prices to drop, but most dramatically in the city of Cleveland and the east inner ring suburbs. It's no surprise, but this is where we find ourselves now. The east inner ring suburbs are about 60% back to where they were at their peak. And this is broken down by inner ring suburbs. And so you can see Shaker Heights is back to 84% of peak, University Heights is at 88%, Cleveland Heights is at 68%, and South Euclid is trailing behind you at 66%. Although our median shows here at 85, I know now we've broken 100, and I'm certain in Cleveland Heights in 2018 you have also climbed quite a bit. So that's good news. Mortgage foreclosures are down. So in 2007, mortgage foreclosures peaked at 4 times their rate in 1995. They've been declining over the past decade and are now on track to reach a level of foreclosure prior to the start of the crisis, so 1995 levels. You're not seeing the mortgage foreclosures that we were seeing at the peak, where we had epidemics of vacancy. So our region in general, they're dropping everywhere. Actually, where they're dropping the least is the east inner ring suburbs, where we are, but we're still down to lower levels. However, tax foreclosure is an issue, and this is going to cause some vacancy in your neighborhoods going forward. Although one of the issues is that we have an epidemic of tax delinquency in Cuyahoga County. There's over 30,000 units that are tax delinquent. And I just checked your figures, and Cleveland Heights has a delinquent tax balance of about $20 million of uncollected tax right now. We've been backing that down in South Euclid. We've gotten it down to about $3 million now, and we're trying lots of tactics to do that. But the real problem here is that the county at this point, even increasing capacity, can only handle about 4,000 cases a year, so that gives them about an 18-year backlog at that pace. So that's why you see a lot of these things sitting, and they're tax delinquent, and you see these delinquencies growing. And there's 3 ways that things can be tax foreclosed. One process, which was developed when our county land bank was established, was the Board of Revision tax foreclosure process, which is for the vacant abandoned properties. This is a very fast process, and you can see those have shot through the roof, and that's getting through that backlog of vacant abandoned. Judicial foreclosures are the ones that it's an occupied property generally, and they have less capacity, although they're trying to balance that out and make it even. So Last summer, we were very fortunate. We got a $200,000 grant from the Cleveland Foundation to do a door-to-door property survey. One of these had been done in Cleveland, and we were able to get enough money that we were able to do South Euclid, Warrensville Heights, Maple Heights, Euclid, and Garfield Heights. It was very insightful. It did tell us that 99% of our stock was rated A or B. So a credit to the code enforcement that we've done for years in South Euclid. It also gave us a lot of insight about what happens when we demolish a house or when we have a rehab, and what the value is to the tax base around that property within 500 feet. So in addition to teaming up with Western Reserve Land Conservancy, we teamed up with Dynamo Metrics, which is a data analytics firm out of Detroit. And they have a regression model where they map out all of your demolitions and all of your renovations, and they determine what the impact was. So we found that demolition on surrounding house values citywide, $45 million added to the tax base in terms of added value. Rehab activities, we've seen about $36 million of impact. So the average impact on neighboring homes within 500 feet of a formerly vacant home that's been rehabbed is $173,000, which is very important and shows you the value of rehab, even incremental rehab. And here's an example. This is the page where you load the Dynamo Metrics. This is public data. So if you take a picture of this, or perhaps you refer to it later, go have a look at what we can do. We can map things, we can show what's tax delinquent, we can show all the property characteristics, we can look at the survey. It's amazing, and what we call this is Neo-Can-Do on steroids. So if you're familiar with Case Western's Neo-Can-Do database, we could not do our job without it. It's how we find out and map all of the trends and all the property characteristics that we're seeing. We have a share of sale. Otherwise, this aggregates all the public data into one place, so you don't have to go to the auditors, you don't have to go to the recorders, you go to one place and you can look at all of your parcels at a glance. Otherwise, we would be driving while blind. So this is an example of one of our beautiful homes. But let's not fool ourselves. This is what we also have, and this is what I've spent 10 years dealing with. And unfortunately, back in the height of the crisis, we had up to a 20% vacancy on some streets, and we had over 900 vacant units in South Euclid. So we were really stuck with old tools, old code enforcement tools that no longer worked on a house like this. So one of the things, in Kermit Lynn, I'm outing him again, was instrumental in doing, was helping us develop our vacant building registration ordinance, which works like a point of sale. So in South Euclid, unlike Cleveland Heights, our voters hate point of sale. And we had one for about 5 minutes until they had a referendum and voted it down. So we were left without a tool in the toolkit to deal with every bottom-feeding flipper and speculator that would come and buy our vacant houses and want to put a coat of paint and some carpet and call it a day. So this gave us the right to go in and do an interior and exterior inspection and create an escrow for them when they were transferring the property. It also has some nice penalties of $1,000 as a daily fine if someone isn't complying, and Kermit Lynn and I worked together to come up with a really, really devious thing of clouding people's title if they didn't comply. It was evil and it worked. So I love that. Through the program, we've had 1,000 formerly vacant homes brought up into full code compliance, and that was since 2010, which is kind of a remarkable result. So one of the great things our former HUD director, who maybe had a little more common sense than the current HUD director did, is develop the neighborhood stabilization program. We competed with other cities to get money from the county to do a project. And what we did was launch the Green Neighborhoods Initiative. And this was a very green-minded approach to using those funds, which were very restrictive and could be used to rehab homes and sell them. It could be used to create green space projects. So we ended up getting $1.5 million, which was amazing, and we got another $300,000 grant from the First Suburbs Development Council. So what we did, because we don't work in a silo in South Euclid, is we partnered with lots and lots of people. And one of our key partners was the Cleveland Institute of Art. So what we wanted to do was show the potential of all of these post-war bungalows, and those were the ones that seemed to foreclose the most. So we had many of these vacant and derelict bungalows like you saw in the picture, and we wanted to reimagine those. So we used green building techniques, and we personally did 5 single-family renovations. The county also put money in, and there were 14 total renovations done. And we also built new homes. And we were doing demolition, and we wanted to show what we could do with those lots once, they were plentiful. We also did a lot of green space projects. So we did 3 little parks within neighborhoods, and we did 8 community gardens, and that was absolutely transformative. So here's an example of one of the houses we did, and the green treatment continued into the exterior, and we had rain barrels, and we had pervious paver patios, and we really did these up. So when we did a house, we staged it, and we had a big party, and we invited all the people in the neighborhood to come. But one of the priorities for us too was to have these houses be first floor living accessible so that they would accommodate every life stage. Because one of the criticisms in South Euclid is there's nowhere to age in place. So we made sure you could live on the first floor. And they were beautiful. So just to give you a little flavor of what they look like, they were pretty stunning. So the idea of building new and showing an example of what the market could do on a 40-foot wide lot, which is what we have a lot of, we wanted to show what you could build green for $150,000 on a 40-foot wide lot. So we created 2 examples, and they sold really quickly. Now, we could never sell them for more than we had in them. That was part of the NSP rules. So the first one we sold for $152,000. The second one was larger, and we sold it for $162,000, and they sold really fast. And I think that shocked the market a lot, because people thought, oh, you'll never be able to build new in South Euclid and make any money. I also want to just give you at a glance in our Quarry Park. We have a beautiful community garden there. It's one of the flagship ones. It's near our splash park. Here's an example of the one on Warrendale Road. They're in neighborhoods where we had demolished homes usually, except for the 2 that we have in public parks. But in total, we had $3.1 million of grant money that went into the city from like 2009 on. And that was a tremendous boost, because the private sector wasn't really getting South Euclid. It really needed to have a model to follow. So after the grant funds expired, we thought, well, what can we do to keep the momentum going, because we're making such progress with the housing stock? We started a community development corporation. And when I say we, yes, the city started a community development corporation. It has a wonderful board of directors of community stakeholders, but it has been the city that's done a lot of heavy lifting on this. So that was created in 2009. Well, in 2013, we launched what we call the Build, Grow, and Thrive residential resale program. So where you saw the tax delinquency problem and all those vacant houses, as the city, I was able to push a tax foreclosure by working with partners at the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office. And as those properties would come back into municipal hands, because we have a city land bank, what we would do is get an option agreement with our city council. So One South Euclid would get an option to be able to market and sell those properties from our city's land bank. So this took a lot of political collaboration, and our council was very much behind us, as was our mayor. So this is how we've been able to do it. So there's 3 components to the program, and it goes with the city's marketing, because our brand is Come Together and Thrive. So we have the Grow and Thrive program, which gives a resident a chance to buy a side lot and expand their home or garden. The Build and Thrive program gives developers and prospective residents the opportunity to buy land and build a home on it. And Rebuild and Thrive is where we are able to get a structure from tax foreclosure or other sources and resell that. And how the program has worked is we've worked with private developers. So we haven't done them ourselves in-house, but we have quite a few developers that we trust and know. And when we get a home or a lot, we put out a request and we say, is anyone interested? So we sell the home to them with a reversionary deed that says that if you don't do what we want you to do, we can take the property back at any time. So what our program says is you have to rehab to our standard, which is higher than code standard. You know, we want to see a very nice kitchen. What we want to see is a comp for the neighborhood. So we're not interested in making a lot of money on the front end, but we want to see that sell high on the back end, So those neighbors now have a high comp next door. So we want to see nicer kitchens, we want to see a landscape plan for the exterior, and it must be sold to an owner-occupant. So that program has done very well. So since 2013, we've had 28 rehabs of formerly vacant and blighted homes, most of which I was ready to tear down. We're very close to the wrecking ball. And that's resulted in $3.3 million of sales to owner-occupant buyers. In some neighborhoods where you would see predominantly rental properties, we're starting to see owner-occupants, and this program's been a catalyst for that. 14 vacant lots have been sold for construction or side lot expansion, which has generated about $425,000 of program income, which our organization then invests back into the neighborhoods. So here's an example of a house that we were certain we were going to tear down, and we have a wonderful rehabber who had to almost completely rebuild it. Now, we didn't make a whole lot on the front end. I think we sold this house to him for maybe $6,000. It could have been less. Michael Love, you could correct me. About $5,000. But at the end of the day, this is a gem, and he has done a historical restoration of this house, and it's going to be the jewel of the neighborhood. So here's an example of another house we got through the state forfeiture process, and this was a hoarder's house that had fallen into absolute disrepair. And this was one that our organization just completed, and this was through a developer that we used quite a bit. And this is the after. So this house is on the market, I think, for $150, I believe, something like that. So here, $165. So here it was, and here it is. So kind of an amazing transformation. So new construction, because we had the courage to build two examples, two idea houses, we started to see a little bit of a boom in new construction. The city has a citywide CRA, which I believe has been a big catalyst, which gives a 5-year, 75% tax abatement. But we have had 33 units built since 2010. 15 have been single-family infill scattered sites. So where we've had to demolish homes, new homes have gone up in their place. Then we have 18 in our Cutters Creek development, which is near the metro parts, if you're familiar. Our total sales of new homes have been $5.7 million with an average sale price of $172,000. So where did the money go that we earned? It went right back into the neighborhoods. And so in 2016, we started a grant program. One of the things we identified as a need is that many of our residents could not get home repair capital because they didn't have enough equity in their homes because of the erosion of values. So we wanted a way to help them fix up their homes, and this was it. So we have an owner-occupied grant where we give our residents up to $2,000 to make home repairs, a community beautification grant up to $1,000 for projects to beautify public spaces. Community events and engagement will give you $500 to have a block party. And then we have a grant for rental properties owned by South Euclid residents to help them make repairs where they put in a match. We also started last year a senior grass cutting and snow plowing grant because we realized a lot of our seniors were struggling, and this was a way to help them. And this year, new is a storefront renovation program. So we put some significant capital into that, and we're seeing some wonderful projects coming on our Mayfield Road corridor. So we've awarded 267 grants since 2016. The total dollar amount we've granted has been just over $200,000, and the value of the projects that have come out of that have been about $500,000. So it's been a pretty amazing program. Our median prices have been up in 6 years, 54.5%. So this is our median sales price, which is pretty impressive, and I would think yours has done about the same climb. And the big news, since 2010, there's been $150 million of residential and commercial investment made in our community, which is a big story to tell, and we're very happy about it. So that's our story. And I want to point out, if I could, Michael Love, if you could raise your hand. We have Dan Subwick, and we have Stephen Carr on our staff. And when I tell you, it's kind of just us doing this stuff, it's us doing this stuff. Because when South Euclid does not have a staff, the city allows us to share our staff time and do this. And that's how it got done. So thank you. I don't know if there's time for questions.